You guys can have a seat. We all have things that we are not good at, right? We can't be good at everything. Unless you are a 17-year-old boy, you're probably pretty aware of your limitations, right? Because when you're 17, you're a boy, like you think you're great at everything. That's perfectly normal. But when you get a little older, you understand that you're not so great at certain things. How many people here are really bad at math? Okay. How many people here are bad at spelling? Okay. Who is a bad driver? Yeah. Who has someone sitting next to you who's a bad driver? Right? Who is bad at cooking? Okay, who wonders why the bad cook that you brought to church didn't raise your hand? Don't put your hand up, that's a trap. I'm on the verge of being 37 years old in just a couple weeks, and I am acutely aware of what I am not good at. That list I gave you, that was my list, okay, because I'm really, really bad at math. And I can't, anybody know about my spelling deficiency? Anybody who's read anything I've ever written before or seen me post on Facebook? Yes, my friends know, right? But I have a special gift when it comes to driving. Sometimes I'm on the freeway and I wonder why there's a line of cars 3 miles behind me, and I look up at my speedometer and I'm going 37 miles an hour in the fast lane. It's true. Like, I'm not exaggerating. And sometimes I get frustrated with Andrea when we're driving, and she's like, turn right, turn left, turn right, turn left. I'm like, woman, why are you telling me where to drive? And she's like, you keep passing up our driveway. I just want to get us home. I remember one time, and some of you in here remember this, I remember one time that we were going on a mission trip back in the youth ministry days. We were going to New York City. And see, I went separate from the charter bus. Some people are smiling, I can see it. You know the story. I went separate from the charter bus. I want to stop home, say goodbye to my wife and kids. I'll catch up with you guys. I'll catch up. And right about the time I was in Cleveland, I realized I couldn't catch up with the charter bus because New York City was in the other direction, okay? And these people are somewhere in Ashtabula County, and I'm in Cleveland. True story. I'm a terrible driver. I'm also really bad at dates. I forget things all the time, important dates. On Friday, I was talking to Jared Bush, and we were talking about our worship leader's wedding, which was that day. Give it up for Aaron, who's not here, and his new wife. And I said, Jared, are you know, what time are you going to the wedding tonight? He's like, bro, the wedding's Sunday. The wedding wasn't Sunday. But see, I'm so bad at dates that he convinced me that the wedding was Sunday, and I was just at the rehearsal dinner a few hours earlier, okay? I'm bad at dates. My wife will confirm this, especially when it comes to days like Mother's Day and anniversaries and her birthday. But see, today we're going to break the trend because it's her birthday, and I'm going to wish her a happy birthday in a very public way. Come on, stand up. Stand up. Good job. She knows I was just trying to embarrass her. I've been waiting for her birthday just to embarrass her. Sometimes you have to be aware of the things you don't do well. And I think for the most part, most of us are aware of the things that we're not very good at. But I also think it's good for us to celebrate the things that we do really well. We're coming up to our anniversary as a church. Just 2 Sundays away, we'll celebrate our launch day, which was September 18th of last year. I remember this time last year, we were totally freaking out. Like, is anybody come to this church? Like, are they going to come and then leave? Like, what's going to happen, like, when we invite people into this building? Because at that time, there was like 25 of us. And so it was really nerve-wracking. And so as we discuss our launch anniversary, as we discuss that special time for us and all the things we've done this year, naturally we're going to want to discuss the things that we've done really well. Our community at Altar Church has done things that's been pretty great for a brand new church. Mary Ness wrote an article or wrote a letter to the News Herald, and here's what she said. She said, Altar Church's 1-year anniversary is September 17th at 10 a.m. Altar's launch is one of the largest in Northeast Ohio history, which was true. The attendance has quadrupled the new church attendance expectation in the first year. 50 people have been baptized. After opening their doors for less than 90 days, Altar gave away a free Thanksgiving meal to the community. Not just members, anyone who needed a meal that day was welcome. Also, volunteers took leftovers to surrounding fire stations and homeless shelters. For Christmas, Altar offered again a free meal to the community. Painesville was invited to come out in their pajamas to have pancakes at Altar Church on Christmas morning. They gave away 1,200 donated toys. There were volunteers in costumes dressed as Frozen characters, and a local photographer donated their time to take pictures of the little ones and often entire families with the characters. There were 500 people in attendance at Altar Church's Easter egg hunt. It was located at the Lake County Fairgrounds. Altar does not have a sponsoring agency or network, yet they consistently raise money to give back to people in need and organizations in the community. Altar staff is 100% volunteer. We actually just hired someone. She ain't got paid yet. So we're still 100% volunteer. Altar is partnering with the Salvation Army for their youth ministry. Altar is a church that reaches out to families and young adults. This is often a forgotten or unreached demographic in the church. So this is true. All these things are true. And I think there's more things to celebrate. I love the thoughtfulness that we have behind our calendar. We're real thoughtful about when we have events and how we do them. We try to capture momentum based on the calendar and the seasons. I love the attention to detail we strive for in our communication and our design. I love how well our Connect groups did this summer. We started 5 brand new Connect groups. Lots of friendships were made. It was really, really great. I love that we build community the way that we did this summer with all those picnics and those service opportunities. It was fantastic. I love the changes that we're going to have this fall in our worship experience and some of the things that we're going to do to make this just a better experience for people. I love that we're always willing to try new things. We're always striving for excellence. We have a band that started with a kid just 18 months ago who couldn't even play guitar. And now they're going to be recording their own music, which is pretty impressive. And then they take these songs that we hear on the radio and they make them come alive here. And this is fantastic. I love that we just sent off a family of missionaries to Mexico. It's fantastic. I love that we just added 12 leaders to our ministry teams in the last 2 weeks. I love that we've baptized nearly 50 people. I love that we leverage new things and seasons and celebrations for momentum. We do all of these things really, really well. It's important to talk about these things and celebrate these things because so many people have put so much time and effort into all of these things. But I want to tell you today, before we get into this spot of our calendar, when we start growing and getting crazy with events and service projects and new faces, that we can do all of these things really well. We can do these things with excellence and still not have a great church. The strategic thinking and attention to detail that we do really well, that does not make us a great church. Great small groups and fun events and great music and great preaching, the right kind of culture and great community, all of these things that we feel really good about don't make us a great church. You're probably wondering why Brian and I spent 10 weeks this summer talking about the elements of great community if I'm saying it's not essential. Well, community is essential, and so are those other things. And we want to excel in everything that we do, but I have to be as clear as I can be as we look into our future, our legacy as a church, the difference we make in the world as a church will be defined not by how well we do those things, but by how well we represent Jesus Christ in the community. That's it. More specifically, I hope that we as a church are a church that represents the compassion of Jesus. I hope that we are a church that helps restore dignity to people, reminding them or informing them that they are loved by God. That's the measuring stick. That's how we're going to define success. That's how we're going to define legacy, by bringing compassion, restoring dignity. That is where we'll be making legacy. I want to follow Jesus' model for doing that. And so I want to look up Luke chapter 5, verses 12 and 13. If you don't have a Bible and want one, you can just raise your hand. We'll give you one. Anybody want a Bible that doesn't have one? Otherwise, you can just recite it from memory. I know most of you have this memorized, the entire Bible, I'm sure. If you don't have it memorized, you can take out your cell phone, use the Bible app. If all of those things don't suit your fancy, just look up there. Before we jump in, context is extremely important. This is right at the beginning of Jesus' ministry. He's quickly making a name for himself. In previous chapters, it says he's healed many people, he's teaching, he's shown up in one of these religious centers and says, hey guys, guess what? I'm the Son of God, in case you didn't know, totally the Messiah. And then he recruits these followers. And so things are moving along very quickly. And then starting in Luke 5, verse 12, it says that while Jesus was in one of the towns, a man came along who was covered with leprosy. And I just want to stay here for a second. Does anybody here know what leprosy is? Anybody know leprosy? Okay, some of the nurses in here, the healthcare professionals. Leprosy is a bacterial infection, and it results in sores or lesions all over the body. It says that sometimes that you might not even have symptoms for 5 or 20 years. It involves the eyes, the upper respiratory tract, involves the nerves, and what it does is it deadens your nerve endings, so you lose the ability to feel things. And of course, this is a really big deal, especially in places like your hands. Have you ever hammered a nail in? You hold the nail and you tap it in, right? And you feel the vibrations of the nail, you know where the wood's at, you know where the hammer's at, and you pound it in. Well, imagine if you can't feel the nail, or you can't feel the hammer, what's going to happen when you're going to miss? Okay? And what happens if you can't feel a hot stove, or you touch something sharp and you don't know what's there? You're going to get hurt. And so what happens is people with leprosy would often lose their fingers because of injury. And so if you looked up leprosy, you can Google image that right now, you're going to see people with no fingers. So this person who's approaching Jesus was physically deformed. Bandages would be wrapped around his hands and his face, and he probably smelled like he was decaying, like literally decaying flesh. And leprosy was contagious, and people knew it. So people with leprosy would be set aside to live in a special community called a leper colony. And when they came out into society, it was the duty of healthy people to point them out and say, anybody know? Unclean. Unclean. Now, if this wasn't unfortunate enough, there was this understanding that misfortune or illness was related to people's sin or bad behavior. So people with leprosy weren't just avoided because they were sick. They were avoided because there was a stigma that assumed that they were sick because they were sinners, or they were sick because their family was sinners. So you can imagine that this man, and the text says the man was covered with leprosy. So the leprosy is in an advanced state, covered with leprosy, probably no fingers, open sores, wraps around his face. And if you try to be in his shoes, just imagine this. You are dying. You smell your own flesh decaying. Your body's falling apart. And your family probably wants nothing to do with you. Oh, because you've got a problem. You're sick. There's nothing they can do to help you. And when you walk into town, people are shouting at you and pointing at you. They're scared of your sickness, and they should be, because it's contagious, and nobody wants that. And they're condemning you because they think that somehow this gross, grotesque illness is your fault. But you know you haven't done anything. You just want to get better. And you hear this man, Jesus, and you hear that he's healing people. And maybe he could look past the way you look. Maybe he could look past the way that you smell. Maybe he could look past the things that other people see, and he can look into your heart. So you walk out of that place that people have told you that you have to go. And the people living with you, they've lost hope, and so they're saying, you're crazy. Just accept what's going on. Accept your fate. But you go out to meet him. And you, of course, walk past these people who are pointing at you and saying, unclean. People pointing at you. And you walk past the people condemning you, and finally you see Jesus. It says he fell with his face to the ground and begged him, Lord, if you are willing, You can make me clean. When this man reaches Jesus, he puts his face into the dirt, which is an act of respect. It's also an act of desperation, but probably an act of habit, an act of humiliation and shame, because a man with leprosy was conditioned to keep his face low because he was embarrassed. Verse 13, it says that Jesus reached out his hand and touched the man. I want you to look at verse 13. I want you to shout out the seventh word. What is it? What? What? Touched. Touched. In the Gospel of Mark, it says that Jesus was filled with compassion and touched the man. Touched. There's no word in the Bible that's had a more important impact on my preaching and leadership than this word. And I think you probably know why, even if you don't know why. How many times a day do you make physical contact with another human being? How many times? Lots. I've got 9 people in my house. Like, I make physical contact hundreds of times a day. Hundreds of times. And this is really, really, really important to me. Anybody ever do that, like that test, that love languages test? There's like 4 of them. Anybody have physical touch as part of theirs? Like, that's mine, okay? So I love to hug people. Like, it's like I just meet you, pleased to meet you. I'm going to hug you. You don't hug, too bad. That's kind of how it's going to go. I'm going to hug you. Better get used to it. Like, I need this stuff. I need physical touch. I need it. Even if you don't have a large family, you encounter human beings all the time, handshakes and high fives. And if you've happened to run into Mike Gerson in the morning before church, he's going to give you a holy kiss. You better get used to that. We have an innate desire for physical contact. It's built into us. How often do you think that man with leprosy had the pleasure of physical contact? Was anybody hugging that man? Did anybody touch him for affirmation? Was anybody putting their arm around him to comfort him? No one was touching him. This man was desperate for physical contact. His body was mourning over the loss of human touch. And Jesus, who could have simply spoken the word, reaches out to him and touches him. And see, this shows us the priority Jesus felt in making him feel loved and restoring his dignity. Jesus knew what this man craved: empathy and love. This man needed his dignity restored, and Jesus did all that in one act of compassion and mercy. He touched him. He touched him when nobody else would. Jesus says, they may call you unclean, but I make all things new. I am willing, be clean. And immediately, the leprosy was gone. Now notice that Jesus doesn't say, you are healed. He says, be clean. Because as this man is walking through streets and towns, he was so accustomed to being called unclean that word became his identity. The world made this proclamation over his life that he was going to die apart from the world. He was going to die apart from his community. He was going to die sad and broken and unloved. But Jesus made a new proclamation. Jesus proclaimed his new identity, healed, repaired, renewed, because of his faith. What the world had condemned, Jesus had restored. What the world had left for dead, Jesus brought back to life. And he does this with a heart of compassion and restoration. Jared, can you show me that image? If you look at this image, you can see something that I wrote down with a group of 5 or 6 people back in March of 2015. It's the mission statement of this church before we even knew anybody. It says, to create a home for all people to thrive in the compassion of Christ. To create a home where people can encounter Jesus in all of his compassion and they can grow in him because of his compassion. Above all things, this is what we want to do well. We want to model Jesus well in the name of Jesus. We want to be compassion. We want to be grace. We want to be healing in a world where everything is broken. And that's where we're going to create a legacy. So beyond great programs, beyond full buildings, beyond great events or baptisms or great social media presence or really cool t-shirts, like we want all those things. We want all of those things as we move into this next year. But let's measure our impact as a church in that way by doing 3 things. Number 1, compassion without restriction. Compassion without restriction. This means as people come to us, our first response cannot be, but you. See, we do this all the time in the church. When someone comes seeking Jesus or they come seeking empathy or compassion, we stand as a barrier and we say, but you. Yeah, I know you want Jesus, but you drink too much. And you got to work out that stuff first. You are poor, but you got yourself into this mess. What were you doing? Are you lazy? What's your problem? You have leprosy, but you must have done something to deserve it. Compassion without restriction. Because messed up people don't need to know they're unclean. They already have that figured out. What they need is someone to point them to Jesus so that he can make a new proclamation over their life. Compassion for an addict? Yeah. Compassion for someone who's lied to you? Yeah. Yeah, them too. Compassion for someone who's hurt you? Father, forgive them. They don't know what they're doing. Yes. Compassion is not a transaction. They don't have to promise to get their act together first. How many times have you heard it say, I'll accept them as long as they promise to get their act together? Stop worrying about that. Grace first, then change. But the change part is up to God. See, we can encourage it, we can model it, but that's where God does his work. So we're going to do our part, and we're going to love people while proclaiming the good news that Jesus Christ has made a way back to God and caring enough for those people to walk next to them and model it to them. The second thing that we have to do is restore dignity. See, we're trending in this direction of being a church that attracts people that don't have much experience in church, or attracting people who've been hurt by the church. We are meeting people and welcoming people into our family that have bumps and bruises and baggage, and that's a good thing because we got them too, amen? We have them. We got all those things. What they need from us primarily is for us to do what Jesus did, to reach out our hands and touch them. Now, this is more than compassion because it asks us to do something. There's activity involved. As it says in Mark, Jesus, filled with compassion, reached out his hand and touched him. The response is compassion. It's an active love that either reminds or informs people that they are worthy of God's love and in need of God's love. few weeks ago, as you know, we had some members of our community who died. And we had a memorial service on a Wednesday. There was 240 people here. 30 or 40 of them were from Erie, Pennsylvania, from a transgendered community. And I stood right here, and I talked about the gospel. Do you know what I saw? I saw people mesmerized because they were hearing about Jesus' love for the very first time for many of them. And then when the service was over, I saw people hugging one another. See, the people over here and the people over here were coming together. I saw conversations. I saw a group of people that felt warmth and love from people they didn't even know. And I heard of a girl who made the comment, maybe God does want something to do with me. And the man who shared the stage with me earlier, he answered her and says, don't sell yourself short and don't sell God short, because he literally died so he could have something to do with you. He literally died so he could have something to do with you. See, this is how we restore dignity. Reminding and informing people that they are worthy of God's love. The third thing that we must do is prepare for the increase. In Luke chapter 5, it says that because of this healing, that Jesus grew in fame. More people were coming to him. Why? Because people want compassion. People want healing. People want restoration. And if we can provide this, we will see God using us as a vessel of his grace. Like I believe that God sends his sheep to churches and people that he can entrust with their care. If we can show compassion, if we can restore dignity, this community will grow. And it will be full of people, all sorts of people who are in desperate need of grace. Do you want that? Are you sure? Well, because the difficulty in that is we'll be a church full of people that need patient love, perseverant love. And that means that all of you will have to commit to being patient and perseverant. Grace is very easy on the front end. Grace is exhausting in the middle. But if we're going to be a church that loves people well, that models people well, we will be a church that grows. We'll be a church that attracts the outcast and the rejected. But we will need to be committed to a path of restoration with all those people who come, and that is hard work. But I want to tell you that is where Jesus does his best work. Sitting in here in a sermon and raising your hands in praise and going to a picnic, that's easy Christianity. This stuff is the hard stuff, but it's where Jesus shows up the most. This is where we live. And it's where Jesus does his best work. And when we do it in his name, the reward will be more work. But the work is where the joy is. Listen, the work is where the joy is. That's when we fall in love with people. That's where the gospel is made known. That's where the Spirit of God is. Last Sunday, I was at CVS in Painesville, and I was getting my beef jerky and my Gatorade and my poison ivy medication. And I was in line on my phone, because I'm really good at ignoring everybody in the world and just playing on my phone, scroll, refresh. And in front of me was a woman, and she had a walker. And I don't know, I just knew that, I don't know what was going on, but I knew that she had some kind of brain injury potentially just by the way she was talking. And I saw her walking with this walker, and if you're in healthcare, you know, like this is the way to walk with a walker. Like you don't want to be out here leaning right? It's not good. When you're leaning, something bad's gonna happen. And so she's walking and she's hunched over. And again, I'm just scroll, refresh. And I didn't really pay much attention. But I went out to my car. And as I'm in my car, getting ready to pull out, I see this woman and she's right by the door and she's on her knees. And I think what was happening was she was trying to get her walker off the curb. And she either fell or she lowered herself to the ground. And she's right by the front door, and nobody is helping her. And look, I just walked by her. I didn't help her either. Scroll. Refresh. But there she was, and she needs help. Now, I don't know if you've ever heard God tell you to go do something. But when he does, you do it. And he told me. And so what happened was I got out of my car. Actually, I pulled up right next to her. I kind of blocked off the exit. I pulled up next to her. I walked over to her. And I already knew what I was preaching about the next week. And then here I just felt this need. I said, God, this is my chance to honor you. I don't know what's going to happen, but this is my chance to love somebody else. And I got closer to this woman, and she's crying. She's crying, and, you know, I'm a sensitive guy, and so I start getting emotional. And she says, I'm so embarrassed. And so I got on my knees in front of her, and I said, what's your name? And she said, my name is Carol. And I looked into her eyes and I put my hands on her shoulders and I said, Carol, my name is Aaron. Now, you don't have to be embarrassed. I'm going to help you now. And I stood up and I began to help Carol up to her feet. And as I'm helping her, I said, Carol, can I pray for you? And I sort of ignored her answer. She said, yes, but I just started. And what I prayed for was in that moment, she would know that Jesus Christ loves her. That she would know that she didn't have to be embarrassed, that she was a human being in need of dignity, and that she meant something to God. And this prayer wasn't profound, it wasn't long, but it's what she needed to hear. And so I walked Carol to her car, and we were laughing and we were chatting, and she got in her car, and she put her hands together, and she said, thank you, Aaron. God bless you. And the best part is nobody else saw it. It was just me and her and God. And this encounter lasted about 4 minutes, but I will never forget it for as long as I live. And I'm not telling you this story because I'm trying to impress you about who I am. I'm telling you because I'm moved by it and I'm humbled by it because God would invite me into a moment with him. And see, that's what's going to happen. It's what's going to continue to happen with all of us here at Altar Church. If we are committed to compassion without restriction, restoring dignity and preparing for the increase, he's going to invite us into the stories and lives of all sorts of improbable people and improbable circumstances. And he's going to use us as vessels of improbable grace. Now, I want us to be a church that's the right kind of church. And I want us to do the extra stuff really well. I want great music. I want great events. I want all of those things. But that won't make us a great church. What will make us a great church, what will help us create a legacy, is loving people well. To create a home for all people to thrive in the compassion of Christ. Stand up and pray with me, church. Jesus, it is my prayer that you impress upon every heart in this room the power of your love, the magnitude of your love. Impress upon us, Jesus, the joy in the work. Bring people to us so we can love them well. Bring the hurting to us so we can break chains. Bring the suffering to us so we can restore hope. Bring the poor to us, God, so we can love them and restore dignity. Jesus, make this church be about you and only you. We are your people. You are our hope. Father God, I pray for revival. I pray for hearts to spring new life. And I pray that it happens in this church. In your name, Jesus. We love you, God, and we hope that you use us for all that you have in store.